that fucking guy. I didn't even think about that. But he comes out, he has his press conference, then he walks it back, and then motherfucker loses. Then he loses everything.
It's like Mr. Magoo just getting hit by steps on and he smacks him in the face, and he turns around and steps on a shovel. He just, it's not even political instinct. It's just bad decision making. And it's a function of what happens when you make decisions based off of money and influence and power and not from principle.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast. It's our special year-end review holiday special coming to you live from Washington, D.C. here at the Casa Rocha Studios. Mike Madrid, are you at your grandmother's house? Where are you at with that wallpaper?
I am in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So in a lot of ways, yes, I am at the house of my abuelo and abuela here in Mexico, the mother country. Sorry if there's a little bit of an echo. But it is what it is. I'm looking forward to this year-end discussion, Chuck. I think we got some good stuff cooking. It's been a heck of a year. So much to have learned, so many discussion points brought forward, and I'm looking forward to making some big decisions here.
Today, we're going to roll out the new awards, and we want to thank everybody. Man, we got so many great responses on the Twitters, on the YouTubes, from the survey that our production team put out. Everybody had some great ideas. And instead of picking just one of those, we've kind of went with where we could brand the podcast and have something that lives beyond whatever we may have wanted to call one particular award and call them the LaVo, LaVo Awards. Did I say that right, Mike?
LaVo Awards. Yep.
LaVo.
Vote. LA Latino VO voted Latino vote LaVo.
I like it. I like it a lot. And these can live on beyond just this election cycle, and we can do it every year. And it's branded back to what we wanted to do, which was this podcast. So folks are super happy. Now, I mess up the Spanish because I had talked like this. So the LaVo is not different than when Mike says it because he has proper Spanish and pronunciation, when sometimes I have a hard time with the English. So the LaVo Awards is what I will call them. And then we will have a best and a worst of these awards to give out today. And I've been thinking about this and thinking about where we start. And I think I want to start with the worst and then save the good for the end and do the best. So I'm going to come up with my three. And instead of just telling you all three, me and Mike are going to go back and forth. I'm going to say one, and then I'm going to kick it to Mike for his one. And then we'll do this for just a minute with all three. And then me and Mike have to come to an agreement. This is our podcast. This is not a democracy. But me and Mike are the only, we are co-dictators here. And so we get to decide between the, what do you call the things that we call Donald Trump all the time? Like, we're the authoritarians here, me and Mike. Right, Mike?
That's right. We make the decision. We're a jury of two.
Woo.
We do want some of that opinion. And by the way, thank you all for the feedback. We got a lot of people responding to the survey, some great recommendations, some great ideas, some great food for thought. We appreciate all of that. But ultimately, we'll come down to Chuck and I battling out between deciding who had the best year, who had the worst year, and who will win the LaVo Award on both sides.
My first of who are losers. And it's not, and I want to be clear, it's not because of them, but there's been nothing positive said about this group. I think the first group of folks who are going to be losers in this election cycle are immigrants. I think immigrants have become a punching bag for lots of people. I think immigrants, especially those immigrants who, like my family and Mike's family, who really sacrificed a lot to get here to give me the privilege I've got today. I don't want to speak for Mike, but I read Mike's book, and a lot of his story looks like my story. And we get to be the recipients of the things that they did. So I think immigrants in this election, whether your Democrats or Republicans, are going to be losers. And I'm going to get to this in my second point, and I don't want to bury the lead. But if things don't happen with TPS and DACA, there's going to be a lot of kids who are really in precarious positions. And it's not just a political policy like we talk about on digital ads or TV ads. These are real people's lives and real immigrants out here who make our world go around every single day, whether they're picking our crops, keeping our kids, whatever they're doing, like my grandparents and my grandparents. But Mike, that's my number one so far of a loser this year.
My number one loser is a little bit more tactical, a little bit more specific, though I'm not mentioning any names. But I think what has borne out over many years of discussions, not just between you and I, Chuck, or at least me and you having to put up with listening to me. But for reasons that I wrote the book and for some of the discussions that I've been having for over a decade now, is I'm going to say the worst was the Biden-Harris Latino polling operation. You saw that in the Atlantic article. You hear it again from immigration advocates. Not just the complete huge miss on what happened in the election, not just the complete huge miss on what was happening on the messaging and the focus, but miss from the better part of the last 3 presidential election cycles. It is unconscionable to me that the Democratic Party can lose Latino voters every one of the last 3 election cycles in increasing numbers, and nobody stops and asks the questions and says, why is our polling so wrong? And to me, 2016 never had to happen. 2020 never had, 2024 never had to happen. We have Donald Trump here because of a purely self-inflicted wound. This did not have to happen. And by far and away, to me, it was the Latino polling operation that's been guiding Democrats for the past 10, 12 years.
So I'm going to move on to my number 2. I'm not going to sit here or debate or talk back and forth with Mike. We're going to move through these, and then me and Mike can talk about which ones of these, because I think Mike's going to have some good ideas, and I know I've got some good ideas. My second loser is what I'm going to call the old guard. And I'm not talking about Mike Madrid, because that's normally what I'm talking about when I talk about old guards. I mean, folks in the Democratic Party. I should have put Democratic old guard, because everywhere in our elections, whether it was AOC running for a ranking member position on the oversight committee or wherever, you're seeing new guards of the party pop up, and the old guards trying to continue to win or do everything, like whether it's the DNC or political consultants, or to Mike's point about polling that he just made. The same people have been doing the same thing for a long time, and I think the old guard lost across the board. So the old guard, Mike, is my number 2 for losers. Who is yours?
My number 2 is Nikki Jam.
What?
Nikki Jam endorses Donald Trump a month before the elections and gets his ass kicked for it. Puerto Rican music star Nikki Jam takes an absolute beating, probably got a couple hundred grand for the endorsement. And then the Puerto Rican comment is made at Madison Square Garden about Puerto Rico being an island of floating garbage. He then, after pissing off and alienating a huge amount of his fan base, withdraws his endorsement of Donald Trump.
Wait, did Donald Trump win? Did he win?
Yeah, Donald Trump win. And so Nikki Jam successfully pissed off absolutely everybody in his fan base and detractors and politically, and got absolutely nothing for it. So Nikki Jam, you're my number 2.
God almighty, that's such a good one. I knew you would have some good ones. My third and final loser is loser asterisk. And what I mean by an asterisk, that's not it. It is that my loser is going to be Joe Biden, but it's Joe Biden around a particular thing, because I thought Joe Biden was a great president and actually ushered in some great legislation that he signed that really is going to help America, not only now, but for the long term, that he gets no credit for. So I'll give the preface to, with all the good things that Joe Biden did for our democracy and coming in and riding the ship and getting things done, he's going to be my biggest loser if, this is the asterisk, if he does not extend TPS protection and DACA extensions before Donald Trump takes over in these last 55 days, because these are kids who came here, like my business partner, Daisy, when she was 5 years old. She's lived in this country for 24 years. She graduated high school with honors. She went to Utah and went to college. She graduated college with honors. She went to work in DC. And this year, she will make more money than a U.S. congressman, pay more taxes than a U.S. congressman, and elected 5 new members of the Congress. So she's being told, when her TPS expires in March, that she is supposed to self-deport with her family and then have a legal entry back in years from now. She hasn't been back to that country since she was 4. Yeah. So this is the effed up thing about what makes me so mad about this. So Joe Biden will be my biggest loser if I don't get an extension on DACA and TPS. So that's my third one, Mike.
My third, and it's very closely related to that and also to your number 1 pick, which was immigrants. The big loser for me, one of the big losers is the myth of America. The idea that we are a country of immigrants. We have so often been faced with xenophobic sentiment in this country and oftentimes not done the right things until too late. I think that over the last couple of decades, the last couple of generations, we believe that we overcame that and we're becoming a better, truer part of who we were as Americans in accommodating not only the least among us, but those that are coming to this country seeking a better life, either as immigrants themselves or being brought as children, as Chuck was just explaining. When we say that we are a nation of immigrants, a country of immigrants, that's not just storybook lore. We need immigrants for all sorts of reasons, not just economic, although that is absolutely true, not just for cultural rejuvenation, although that is very true. We need immigrants because they believe in America and the mythology of America more than those that have been here longer. We literally cannot continue as a country unless there are immigrants. And so in many ways, the anti-immigrant sentiment that has captured so many, including people from our Latino community, is strangling the very idea of America. So it's not a battle that it will forever be lost, but at the moment, I think it's one of its weakest moments in the history of this country. So the idea of America, I think, is one of the biggest losers this election cycle.
Well, we've got 6 here to talk about, and I'm looking at my list because I wrote yours down as you were talking. I think that they're all good. I don't know how we would go about this of figuring out who the biggest loser is, because I think that there's some grandiose ones. I think the myth of America and me talking about the old guard are like things that are changing in front of our eyes that we're not happy with, right? I totally agree with your myth of America or the American dream or who we're supposed to be as a country and who we've been for a long time, but are moving away from. Same thing with this old guard. I like your Nicky Jams just because that fucking guy, I didn't even think about that, but he comes out, he has his press conference, then he walks it back and then motherfucker loses. Then he loses everything.
It's like Mr. Magoo just getting hit by steps on and it smacks him in the face and he turns around and steps on a shovel. It's not even political instinct. It's just bad decision making. And it's a function of what happens when you make decisions based off of money and influence and power and not from principle. So I don't know if he's the biggest loser, Chuck, but he's a big one. Boy, he took a beating this cycle and he deserved it.
Yeah. I don't know, Mike. I could go with any of these. I don't know if we went with something like the myth of America or immigrants being the losers. I don't want that to be misconstrued as us calling them losers, of course. But I don't know who we would mail an award to tell them that they just won the worst of. If it was the old guard, I could think of 15 consulting firms I'd like to send that to in D.C., but I probably won't unless I put your name on it. Biden, I'm not going to send him the TPS one. Go ahead, Mike.
Wow. Why don't we maybe compromise here a little bit and say that the big loser here is the country because of its loss of understanding that immigrants are what this country is, and we'll send it to the White House just as a reminder that as the keeper of the flame.
I got an idea, Mike. Let me interrupt. Yeah, something just came to my mind.
Okay.
What if we say the loser is the inscription on the Statue of Liberty?
Okay. I like that.
Because that has been there as a beacon, and the loser right now is her and that statement. We have walked away from that. What do you think?
I like that a lot. And so let's do that. Let's come up with the language. We don't know if we need to do it right now at this moment, but I think it has something to do with our understanding of who we are as a nation of immigrants has been lost. That has been the biggest loss that we've taken, and what that means.
And it takes in several of yours and several of mine. So we're going to say that that's the worst, is us walking away from who we are as a country and a nation of immigrants and being welcoming of our weak, the tattered, all the things that are on that. I don't know all of it. But
the tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
Ooh, I knew the professor would come out with the right stuff. I like it. So that's going to be our loser. So now the good part is we get to talk about the winners and we get the more positive look on this as our year-end review. And though for those of you just tuning in who like to avoid the Mike Madrid opening and get right to me, the LaVo Awards, we've come up with the LaVo Awards, and Mike loves it when I say it with this good Texas accent, the LaVo. I will come up with something to go with LaVo. It stands for Latino Vote Awards, but we've shortened it for all of you dyslexic people in the back. So for my first winners, and then we're going to go to Mike for his first winner. Which category do I want to use? My first winner is TikTok. Stay with me.
All right.
TikTok was voted to be banned by the U.S. Congress, was going to be signed by Joe Biden. But all of a sudden this week, because Donald Trump wins the presidency and the TikTok CEO carries himself down to Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump in a press conference this week was like, I like this TikTok. I knew I was against it before I was for it, but this TikTok helped get me elected, and I'm down with the ticks and the talks. On top of that, when you think about China, Chuck, there's no way he could do it because of China. Well, not only does he okay with China, he's invited its Chinese senior delegation to come to the inauguration. So I think the big winner this cycle, as one of my three, is the app TikTok, because they have had a good fortune shined upon them with Donald Trump getting elected. That's my number one.
It may be the saving grace after all of this, right? I mean, Republicans before were trying to ban it. There's a big week coming up, actually, where a lot of this stuff is going to be determined on whether they break up ByteDance or not. So I like that. I like that pick. Mine might be a little bit more obvious. I think that by far the best campaign that spoke to our community and showed that it can fight up against strong headwinds when you're communicating and connecting with people is the Ruben Gallego campaign. I think Ruben Gallego is probably the biggest winner out of this election cycle, not just as a Democrat, although that is absolutely true, but as somebody who has shown the way on facing headwinds that this stuff works, whether there's a red wave or a blue wave. If you stick to the community, meet people where they're at, talk about their concerns, they can deliver you a political victory. So my number one is Ruben Gallego for Senate campaign.
Cool. Well, in full disclosure, it was going to be one of mine, so we agree there. So I'm going to take that off and think of another one to add to mine after I finish my number two. So my number two is, and for those of you who've watched me and covered me over my years of blowing up party committees and super PACs, sit down right now because I'm fixing to do the opposite. My biggest winner is the DCCC and House Majority PAC, which are the party committees for the House races and the super PAC for the House races. And let me explain, is that we flipped 6 seats from Republicans to Democrats. 4 of those are in heavy Latino areas in a year when Republicans overperform and get 6 million more votes for Donald Trump than they did the year before. But wait, there's more. These seats were picked up in places where those millions of votes came from, which were California and New York. So if you look at these congressional seats and the performance of Latino voters and the electorate as a whole, in a state that way overperformed for Donald Trump, like California and New York, these were little islands of success, because in all the congressional seats around them, it was the opposite conclusion. And the persons who should get credit for that are the operation who started spending money talking to Latinos earlier than I had ever seen before on House races. Full disclosure, I got to work on a few of these, not all of these, but it's something very different. And when you're looking for success stories this cycle, and the reason I'm not giving the credit to the candidates, and I don't think the candidates run bad races or they wouldn't have won, but they didn't do the work that these folks did on the Latino vote part of this. because those candidates had all white consultants, all well-intentioned, run the same campaigns, did a fine job. They didn't do a crazy great job, but they did a good job or they wouldn't have got elected. Rudy Salas is the opposite of this and of a bad candidate and a bad campaign, and they didn't win, even with all the stuff from the D-Trip and HMP. But in California 13 and California 17 and New York 4 and New York 22, there was something very different happening in these little races while the rest of the state around them were going to hell in a handbasket. I'll stop my big old tirade there to say the DCCC and the House Majority PAC should get credit for dragging a lot of these Democratic candidates to victory in November.
That's a big change for Chuck Rocha, but hats off to him. Just game sees game. And when people do right, we're going to acknowledge it. When people do bad, we're going to acknowledge that too, which is a good segue to my last two. And I'll take them one by one, of course. I'm not sure if our listeners are going to like or appreciate this, but you all know Mike Madrid. I'm not looking for friends here. I am looking to kind of make us question some of our earlier assumptions.
I'm nervous.
My number two here, and the biggest winners in the Latino vote specifically, is the Ted Cruz campaign. And I want to tell you why. 6 years ago, Ted Cruz lost the Latino vote by 19 points. In 2024, he won by 5. That is a 24-point shift. Respect. Game's got to recognize game here. That is a massive, massive shift. And for a guy like Ted Cruz, who has such high personable unlikables, to move the vote that significantly means they were doing something right. So we can pat ourselves on the back all we want, and we should when we do things right, but we've got to recognize when somebody else is doing something right that we don't like. And if you don't like my number 2 pick, you're going to really hate my number 3 pick, Chuck, but that's what it is. Ted Cruz for Senate. The turnaround they did with the Latino vote in the last 6 years was a big, big story coming out of 2024.
Ooh, now everybody calm down, sit down. I'm going to bring you back to some good news. Ted Cruz. I can't believe you said Ted Cruz. Since Mike Madrid said Ruben Gallego, I wrote down another name instead of my Ruben Gallego pick, which was a guy named Gabe Vasquez. I think Gabe Vasquez is a shining light, much in the mantra, much in the reflection of Ruben Gallego. He's a working class, blue collar guy. He showed up at my Christmas party Saturday night in D.C. and nobody knew he was a congressman because he had on a hat and he had on just a regular button up like flannel shirt with his wife or partner, and just a dude's dude, like just a regular guy. You would have never know in a million years that this guy was a congressman, and he walks that talk, because me and Mike have run into so many asshole folks who love to see their name on stuff, and they're a congressman from the moment they walk in the room. This is the most unassuming dude. He loves his community. He's a hunter. He's an angler. He lives on the border. He can be all of those things. And he had worked his ass off. And in a district that is literally an R+1, he showed Democrats how to win. And so Gabe Vasquez is one of the shining lights, much like Ted Cruz, evidently. And I don't make fun of Mike's pick because Mike is absolutely right. And I actually agree with Mike. 24 points. You can't just say that that's some made up shit. Like that's real. But anyway, Gabe Vasquez for me, Mike.
Well, if you didn't like my Ted Cruz pick, you're really going to hate this last pick.
My God.
Never in the history of this country has a presidential campaign increased their vote share, their Latino vote share, 3 times in a row. And you have to take your hat off, whether you want to stomp on it or spit on it, to Donald J. Trump. I'm gonna say my third pick of the best year of 2024 politically was Donald Trump. I spent my life, or my career anyway, opposing this guy. Very few people have lost what I've lost to do that. I'm not happy about it, but like I said, the math is undeniable. The successes are undeniable. And the lessons, I think, most importantly, are undeniable. So my third, and I have no doubt that this bill will not get out of committee, Mr. Chairman, but my third pick for top best year is Donald J. Trump and what he was able to do with Latino voters in the last 3 presidential elections.
Well, I'm really proud of our 6 things, and nobody on the internet if you're watching on YouTube because you like to see my pretty face, or if you're listening on one of your favorite social media apps for podcasts, can argue any of the facts that we just said. All 6 of these people had incredible years. It's really going to be hard for us to figure out which one of these are the best. I like to think that this is why you listen to this podcast, because me and Mike gave some really interesting and unique ideas, but they all were winners in some level, even the TikToks and even Donald Trump. Like, there's no doubt that there is something happening in our community. There's no doubt that, and I give Mike Madrid credit on this, is that there's been shifting. There's been folks that are not doing a good job. This electorate is moving around and literally made the difference in lots of places this year. There was just a lot of things going on. Mike, let's talk this out like we did the worst. I think that any of these are good. I didn't think I knew somebody was going to say Trump, and they should say Trump. Ted Cruz was a little something different, but you got to give Ted Cruz credit now. And I would say Ted Cruz.
At least it's a campaign operation. I don't know if it was Ted Cruz, but it's people.
That's a good point. Great point. Yeah. And I'd like to say that it was because he was unopposed and that Allred didn't run a very good campaign. But if y'all remember, Allred had a shit ton of money. It wasn't because Allred didn't have a campaign.
And I think he was a great messenger. And you could say it's a bad year, but the question is, it was a bad year because why? Because of the fundamentals and where that they were heading. And again, I don't know if I'm ready to accept that it was necessarily those candidates. And I said, remember what I said is, I'm saying it's the Ted Cruz campaign.
Good point.
Cruz.
Yeah, good point.
And I'm saying it's the Donald Trump campaign. I'm not saying it's necessarily Donald Trump.
That's fair.
So like I said, this is in no way a validation of who they are. But having said that, like I said, it is equally or more difficult, as you know, Chuck, to fight headwinds when a national trend is going against you.
Yeah.
To remain committed to your strategy. Credit where credit's due to Trump and Cruz for leaning into where this was going, but they were filling their sails with the wind at their back, pushing them in this direction. The campaign that was pushing against those headwinds and still made up ground despite the national narrative, despite resistance from polling firms and from the old guard that you were talking about, saying this isn't how you win, this isn't the message that wins, was Ruben Gallego. So I've got 3 top picks, but my number 1 was Ruben by a wide measure. Like Ted Cruz's and Donald Trump's campaign, I think they need to get their a little hat tip and a head nod, but they're still 3 laps behind what Ruben was doing.
And I think that's, and everybody knows I'd worked with Ruben, and I appreciate that. And I agree. If I'm just being honest with myself of what you just said, is that Ruben Gallego had a great campaign. But the thing that made Ruben Gallego different, I think, is the point you're making, is Ruben himself as well. So like, you didn't have to work. Ruben wasn't out there off message like Donald Trump, or Ruben wasn't doing a podcast like whatever, like Cruz or whoever. Every day, and there's a great Times piece today or this week, Time magazine did a profile where he talked about the trauma in his life growing up and talking about like what it was like to have to try to make it. Just make it. Not make it to a congressman, but make it through a day. Yeah. Like, he's the most authentic person I think I've ever worked for. And I worked for Bernie Sanders, who's very authentic. It's nothing against Bernie, but Bernie hasn't had the same life experiences that Ruben had. And Ruben wasn't scared when he had a room of consultants telling him not to talk about his daddy or telling him not to talk about his PTSD and telling him not to do a boxing match because somebody would get hurt. He stood up to them, and I watched him personally, and that's what made it really different. I'd never seen a campaign, the guy running or the woman running, stand up to a media consultant, and not our media, anybody, media, mail, whatever. Yeah. But they normally cower because they assume we know, right, Mike?
You're hitting it right on the head. There's an authentic, and I love that word authentic, right? It's what everybody says about Donald Trump. Ruben Gallego knows who he is. He has had a very difficult, challenging life on multiple different fronts, but he's not afraid to say what he thinks. He's done it to me on social media, right? Like I think the world of him because of that. But what he's also doing is he's challenging his party to say, My story is remarkable because it's not remarkable. The people from my community are suffering through a traumatic event right now. And people that are dealing with trauma don't necessarily make the best decisions. And that's what I think Ruben is saying is if I can be a reflection of that voice and guide my community, they will respond and they will come to me and they will rally around this banner. And he was right. He proved it right because he's not afraid to say, I don't care what your polling says. I don't care what your focus group says. I know who I am. I know what my experiences were. I know this is not unique. This is where we're going. And come hell or high water, I'm going to make the case and argue for it. That's why he won. If he had followed all of the consulting advice, moving him, the DC folk moving in a different direction, this was a close race. And the only reason he won is because he held true to his life experience and recognized very importantly that his story is our story. And in so many ways, that's what I'm trying to drive this narrative of understanding. Ruben Gallego's story is an ethnic Latino story, but more importantly, it is an American story as we become a different America. This is a guy who had a really hard scrabble life, who grew up under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, who put his life on the line every day in a foreign country for our flag, for our people, for this country. He went back to an Ivy League school in order to be a better public servant. Like those are the types of women and men that we have looked to throughout our country's history to lead us. And part of that leading is the conviction that your life experience is representative of the community that you are leading. That's why I think Ruben Gallego won. That's how you beat sharp political headwinds. That's what happened in 2024. And I'm just really, really proud of him.
Well, I think we have our answer on who won the best of the award shows for today. And I think that Ruben is a great recipient of that. I think we agree on that, just like we agree on the worst of. And I'm ashamed to say that the worst of is the philosophy of what America was built on. The immigrants who work here every day, the Statue of Liberty that sits in the New York Harbor that talks about this message, if we felt so much about this that we'd put it on a statue and take the statue from France or wherever we got it and put it right out there for everybody to see, we're not hiding. We put on a statue in the middle of the ocean so when a boat came by it, people could talk about what's on that thing, about this is a country that welcomes us so we can help build this place. Mike, I'm so happy you came up with this as a theme, because I think it cuts through all of the what's the worst of the year, which is that. And then the not transactional, but was it the opposite transcend? The opposite thing of that is Ruben. Ruben is that America dream.
Correct. And that's the struggle that the country is in right now, right? These two forces. And I think as much as there has been a loss, like I said earlier, it's a setback. It's not a loss. The way you win is to lean into what the Ruben Gallego was doing, what he was saying. And I think the only debating point we ought to debate in finesse here, and I'm good with it either way, as I mentioned, I was acknowledging the Cruz and the Trump campaigns. I think this is about Ruben Gallego himself as a man.
Yeah,
I know his campaign did a remarkable job, not taking anything from you or the direct team. You guys know, I think, the world of what you did. But this was about a man's character. This was about
I agree with that.
And
so the strategy, Mike, it was, I take a lot of credit for Ruben Gallego's ideas. It came from Ruben.
Well,
I was just implementing it.
Yeah. Then I think we have our answer there. This is for Ruben Gallego. And where he through a sheer force of will and confidence is leading his party. He's not doing it because, like I said, Ted Cruz didn't come up with a strategy here. Ted Cruz's team moved him to lean into what was happening.
Sure.
So that's the difference here. Is character matters, and it's going to really matter in the next administration for those that are opposed to Donald Trump and those that are opposed to this weakening of the American mythology. And I think we can look to Ruben for some leadership on exactly how to do this.
Well, that settles it. Then I think that the award will not go to Ruben Gallego's campaign. I think it goes to Ruben Gallego, A. And
Yep.
then B, me and Mike will put together the worst of award, and that we will have, and we will have it for everybody to see on the internet when we get the trophies done around the immigrants or the nation of immigrants, the how you put it, Mike, I wrote it over here. The myth of us being this country of immigrants, welcoming immigrants, and all the things, and I think that that's really a great way to end the year, because I think we, without knowing it, and me and Mike, that's why we're really good at this, and is because we end up in the same place. And I disagree with Mike Madrid on lots of things, just like he disagrees with Chuck Rocha. But it's so interesting that me as a Democrat, him as a Republican, him growing up in the suburbs of LA, reading the newspaper for the news, me looking at the comic section in a trailer house in East Texas, end up at the same place almost without knowing it. And I think that's what's great about this podcast, what's great about our community and our gente, and about like where we want to go. And Mike, I think that these are great awards, and that we should think about next year. And next year we should do it. It's an off year. We could do it in person, have a little studio audience, and maybe do the awards in DC or somewhere. What do you think?
I think either DC, I'm going to reach
LA?
out.
LA somewhere?
Yeah, let's do it the Latino Caucus in California. Maybe we'll do a little West Coast here. We'll figure out. Maybe we'll do both. Let's figure it out.
I love this. I think this is great because I like that we ended up in the same place and that we have these awards to give out. The first annual LaVo Awards. How do you like how I say that? LaVo.
LaVo.
Oh, LaVo. There used to be this song about this woman who was a witch in Louisiana, and it was Marie LaVo. That's what makes me think about it. It was a funny Marie LaVo, you sexy witch. She peed in a tub and people put their feet in it. Anyway, there was this whole thing about this witch doctor and the LaVo Awards, but LaVo, I know I get it right this time. But as we think about these awards and we end the year, I want to give a little reflection. I want to give Mike a little reflection, and also think about thanking everybody. And thanking everybody who, especially the team, our team here, Andreas and everybody for the year, like they really have worked their butts off. Andreas is an unsung hero in the podcast and our production team who puts this together. And thanks for everybody who, before I kick it over to Mike, who gave us some of your thoughts. Andreas reminded me that we had a few that I really wanted to highlight. Angelica Salas, who came in from California, who said that she thought some of the biggest winners were Puerto Ricans who were fighting for their island. She also agreed with me and Mike around Ruben Gallego in Arizona. I want to thank Angelica for your, Miss Salas, for giving us your input. Also, our buddy Luis Hernandez, who's California and Texas, he thought that the biggest loser this year should have been Paxton, the attorney general in Texas, who went after LULAC. That means that, Luis, thanks for listening to the podcast. You probably were listening to the episode where we talked about going on there. Other people, there was just so many people that gave us all these great comments and stuff. And I wanted to make sure that you knew that we read them all. Andreas went through all of them, put them in like a spreadsheet. We went through each one of them and looked at them. It was really awesome. This year's been really special for me. Obviously, the best thing that happened to me this year is I found an amazing, beautiful woman who would marry me. We had a great year. My kids are healthy and happy. I've been blessed beyond what, and I'm really thankful for all that. Mike, I want to throw it over to you about what you think about ending of this year.
It's been a remarkable year. And again, for you, Chuck, personally, you and Ebony, we've grown closer as friends, to see you guys getting married. Your successes as a firm, you guys kicked ass this year, not just in winning races, but in the way you won the races and the message that you were driving. Look, a lot of elections didn't turn out the way that we had hoped, but the races that you were directly involved in certainly did. I had a great run with a book, with my first book that came out.
Oh my God, your book!
Yeah, so I was on a book tour, which took more out of me than a campaign did, but I got to speak to hundreds of Latino organizations throughout the country and hear you and talk to you. People, were incredibly supportive. My work at UCI, I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful for our friendship, Chuck. I'm grateful that this has taken off, thanks to Jason Villalba, our good friend in Texas, whose idea this was.
Awesome.
There's just so much that's been happening. It's been hard to keep up. But a lot of this all comes back to and comes down to the community that we've built here. Chuck and I, every time we talk, it's like, man, I was at this event and this mayor came up to me, the first Latino mayor. He's like, I love the podcast. I love what you're doing. We hear this all the time. Members of Congress,
all the time,
state senators, just the audience of reporters, the audience that we've built. It really, there is a strong sense of community, and we're going to do everything we can to engage it and bring people out more. Where we can't get your responses to things, we're going to come out to you, which is why Chuck and I, as you know, we love getting out there with the community, talking to people, having good substantive disagreements the way Chuck and I do, but always coming back to our people, always coming back to understanding that the way we are able to come together, not disagree, although we can and we should disagree. We should disagree, but come together for the benefit of the community and give each other the benefit of the doubt that we are trying to build a better country and a better life for our people. That's the way forward. That's how Latinos can heal the United States of America. Of that, I'm absolutely convinced. And it's been an honor to be a part of this big family that's getting bigger. And Chuck, always love being with you, brother. You know that. And Andreas, thank you so much for the work. And we got a big year coming up.
It's going to be big. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I want to wish everybody happy holidays from me and Mike and the entire Latino Vote podcast family. Thanks for being part of our first awards. Don't forget to like us. Don't forget to share the podcast. Don't forget to tell us as we lead into the holidays, because we're still on Twitter every day. We're still on YouTube every day. Talk to us. Tell us what's going on in your family. If you're hearing anything out there, tell us your best Christmas gift. We're going to engage with you, and we're going to see all of you in the new year. Don't forget to call your mama. Don't forget to kiss your grandmama. Don't forget to have a great holiday season. And for me and Mike Madrid, we're out, and we'll see you in the new year.